Dr. Corsi, thank you for joining me today, a little bit early ahead of our broadcast for your still new show, Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America. How are you today, Doctor?
I'm doing fine, Jason. Great to be back with you. Thank you.
And I can see that you've got your web streaming device back in service, so people can expect an excellent show today. You know, one of the things I'm so excited about, Doctor, we're really getting close to the 2020 election, and I think everyone is very curious to see what's going to happen with the FISA stuff, and there really is no one who is better suited to reporting on this than you, Doctor. You're like Jonah, having been in the belly of the whale.
That's for sure. I mean, I was dealing with Mueller firsthand and the entire investigation. As you know, I wrote the book Silent No More, and to describe it. And they were going to indict me for this lying. I did not lie, but I could not give them a connection between Julian Assange and Roger Stone. That was what the Mueller team needed in order to complete their theory that there was collusion with Russia. They wanted to say that Russia stole the emails from Hillary Clinton and that it was through me that Roger Stone got connected to Assange so that Donald Trump could give Stone and Assange instructions as to when to best drop these emails to hurt Hillary. It just never happened.
It's almost absurd to think about it in hindsight, isn't it?
Oh, it's ridiculous. I mean, I think there's a strong argument in the new book I'm writing, which is I'm finishing now. It's called Coup d'etat. It's up on Amazon. I'm writing a whole chapter on Assange, and I think there's excellent evidence that Russia did not steal the emails, and that's, I think, really there's a new book, Coup d'etat. And we're just now working on when we're going to get it in the stores and the like. It's going to be next year, maybe January 28th or possibly even into February. But I think it's going to be good timing. It'll hit the market when the Democrats are running their primaries. And I think it's going to be very topical by that time. We'll discuss it today. But I think it's going to take some time, but it's beginning to unfold what I call the Trump counterattack. And I think now we're going to see, especially with this new Horowitz report on the FISA court abuse, which should be released imminently. It's done, and it's being reviewed right now by Attorney General Barr for classification and make sure it's all accurate. At any rate, I think that's going to begin the real serious indictments, and that's the subject of our show today, which is will James Comey now face justice?
Yeah.
And I think that's really what we're going to discuss here when we get into the full program.
Right, and people can join us for that, Doctor, today at 5 p.m. Eastern by going to patreon.com/Jerome Corsi, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And we're going to be talking quite a lot about Inspector General Horowitz's testimony, which happened yesterday. I think a lot of people were confused, Dr. Corsi, because there was some reporting that Inspector General Horowitz had recommended Comey for criminal prosecution, and it was sort of misreported to the extent that some people thought that was a new revelation, but this was actually known, right?
Well, it was known. I think it was not entirely known because when the report on Comey came out a few weeks ago, all that was announced was that the Department of Justice was not going to indict Comey on these charges of lying for the memos, the 7 private memos. He thought they were private. Inspector General Horowitz thought they were property of the Department of Justice. At any rate, Barr declined to prosecute him. Now, when you think about that pretty hard, it means that Comey had to have been referred by Inspector General Horowitz for prosecution. And in fact, yesterday, when Inspector General Horowitz testified to the House Government Oversight Committee, it was clear he actually was asked if Comey had been referred for criminal prosecution for lying and essentially maybe even for leaking specifically one of the memos which Comey leaked to his attorney, so it would be given to the press in order to start the special prosecutor investigation. But the point was that the one leaked memo did not include classified material. It had sensitive material, but not classified, and that was enough of a distinction so that the Attorney General Barr decided that would be a tough case to win. And I think it also means that there's more trouble coming for Comey. And that developed yesterday during this House hearing when Horowitz was asked to refer again to Attorney General Barr for possible prosecution, Comey for lying to Congress and for lying to Congress and misrepresenting the conversation that he had with President Trump. See, in January, Comey went to see Trump before he was president, and they had a meeting. The FBI came and met with Trump, and Comey stayed a little bit longer. And he said, well, as Attorney General, as head of the FBI, he wanted to share with Trump this Steele report. Now, in that meeting, it was not just evidently to brief Trump, because what we now know from Inspector General Horowitz's report that Comey had set this meeting up. He had meetings and prior meetings with Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and others of at the Department of Justice, and he was prepared in his limousine to have a computer where he could make notes. So they were going to ask President Trump, President-to-be, President-elect Trump, what he thought of this memo. And if he said things that were incriminating, it was really an FBI interview. And, of course, you can't lie in an FBI interview. And if Trump said something incriminating, then Comey was prepared to make a contemporaneous record of that and to use it in the case that they were beginning to build against Donald Trump, or that they were really. And also, Comey told Trump that he wasn't a target of the FBI investigation, but it seems pretty clearly he must have been a target.
Well,
or they were wanting to make him into a target.
Yeah, you've used an important word, Doctor. You said James Comey set this up. And everything that you're describing right now, it just sounds like a setup. He's setting Trump up in the same way that they set up Flynn, in the same way that they set up you. They sort of lure in these people who maybe don't have so much experience with law enforcement. I don't think you've ever been arrested or interrogated by the FBI before. So there's an inherent pressure, I would imagine, that you feel when somebody that powerful comes to the door and starts asking you questions. And so Comey's there showing him the Steele dossier, which in retrospect, how could any thinking person not realize that that was just a solidly ridiculous pack of nonsense?
Well, first of all, I was not arrested by the FBI. I was never arrested in the entire time I dealt with. The 40 hours I went to Washington were all voluntary, interrogations with the Mueller team. But I was not arrested, and in fact, I was not indicted. So, I wanted to make that very clear.
Yes.
When Comey showed Trump or talked to him about this Steele dossier, it had to be, first of all, Trump's reaction was, this is all a lie. It's all nonsense. This is, none of this ever happened. This is complete fiction. But then Trump's got to wonder, well, why does Comey have this?
Yeah.
And Comey is saying, well, it's scurrilous. And yet they had used that going back to October 21st, 2016, just, the previous months prior to the election. They'd used the Steele dossier as the predicate, the basis for getting these FISA court warrant to do electronic surveillance on Carter Page. So, again, Comey was not being honest with Trump in saying, well, this evidence, this dossier exists, and we're looking at it, and discounted its importance, when really that's not a fair representation of the actual importance that the FBI and the Department of Justice prosecutors gave to that document, because it was their centerpiece of information. It was the backbone of the entire counterintelligence investigation. And the Steele dossier was never validated. It was never verified. It couldn't be verified because it was all essentially a pack of lies.
Yeah, I mean, you would think if Donald Trump is accused of doing something in a hotel in Russia, it'd be very easy to find a lot of documentation. First, you'd check with the hotel. Was he ever checked in there? Did he ever register there? Did a plane that he owns or a plane that he was using ever land there? Do we have video of him entering the hotel? I mean, it's almost absurd to think that the FBI would take any action on a document like this without doing that type of basic verification. If you and I were to report on something like this, even here on YouTube, people would lambaste us for having not followed through it all. And just today, we've heard from the Daily Caller that the State Department is providing the first glimpse of Christopher Steele's pre-dossier intel reports, and they're not very positive in terms of their outlook on Christopher Steele.
Let's see. This is a new article. This is Chuck Ross. Well,
yeah.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Well, yes. I think some of this is. We may not have seen the reports, but this has been reported before, because this is the State Department where Steele went to try to sell his dossier and get it a level of credibility coming from the State Department over to the FBI.
Right.
And we know from reporting that the Judicial Watch did on documents that they've obtained from FOIA requests that, in fact, these meetings occurred. I'm not sure we've seen the State Department memos on the meetings. That will be very interesting to read. But it's an interesting point. I think what I'm going to indicate here is I think more documents are going to be coming out. It's been one of the difficulties with writing books at this time, although I think I've got to the core of what happened in this coup d'etat. And the point is, we were learning new things. And what I was going to say about Comey was that Comey was just not being honest. He was playing games. He was, first of all, Donald Trump deserved to know that this document existed and was being taken seriously. And I don't think Comey presented it that way. And secondly, the nature of the claims that Donald Trump had prostitutes in Moscow and they had a golden shower in the same hotel room that Barack Obama and Michelle slept in the same bed that they had slept in previously. Well, all of this is, when you get down to it, it's all completely nonsense.
Yeah.
And the nature of this kind of a report is one that Donald Trump would have said, well, even Putin ridiculed it. Putin said, I'm glad that Trump likes our prostitutes. They are the best in the world. But
oh my God.
By the way, it's Donald Trump is telling Comey, do I look like I'm the kind of guy here who needs prostitutes? I mean,
right.
It's a joke.
Yeah.
And anybody who'd be in Moscow and who would be indulging in prostitutes and not think that they were going to be under surveillance and that be used for blackmail would be a complete fool.
Right.
And Donald Trump, I think, was not a complete fool. He would not, even if he was inclined to use prostitutes, he wouldn't do it on that occasion. And the point is that Comey took this dossier and they were advancing it as the centerpiece of their allegations that Trump was colluding with Russia. And the truth is they had no verified, independent proof of that premise. Yet they began a counterintelligence investigation in July 2016. By October 2016, they were getting permission to do electronic surveillance of Carter Page. I'm not even sure they really cared about getting surveillance of Carter Page, except to get surveillance of whomever Carter Page was talking to. Right. So Carter Page talked to someone else in the campaign. Well, then, as collateral, the FISA warrant would have allowed the FBI to go and do electronic surveillance of the person that Carter Page was talking to.
Yeah.
And I think that was the real goal, is to develop this web or this network Carter Page contacts and to have them all under electronic surveillance. Because I think the real primary purpose of what was going on was political. They wanted to know what was happening on the inside of Donald Trump's campaign. And then they wanted to plant in it incriminating information that they could then subsequently use in almost like an entrapment scheme to say that Donald Trump is colluding with Russia.
It's pretty troubling to learn how frequently the FBI engages in these entrapment-style tactics. It's essentially what they tried to do with you, and we're going to be talking more about the possibility that James Comey will face justice in just 15 minutes when the full show begins on patreon.com/Jerome Corsi, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Before we break from here and go over there, Doctor, I do want to remind people that if they aren't sponsors, they should go over to Patreon and become a sponsor within the next 15 minutes, but they can also learn more about you by going to CorsiNation.com. People can support your reporting and your writing and your various legal efforts to actually serve justice and see that justice is done by clicking on the donate button on CorsiNation.com. Before we wrap up here with the free preview, Doctor, is there anything else that you wanted to cover in the next few minutes?
Well, I think we were also, in covering some of the things that are happening this past week and currently, I want to talk about Iran because this whole new ramping up of major violence, escalation of violence in Iran attacking Saudi Arabia, and what are the consequences of this going to be? President Trump looks like he's going to increase sanctions and not do a military response, which I think is appropriate. I think it's the right path. I'm not sure if Saudi Arabia will launch a military response. I think that's yet being deliberated, and we'll find out pretty soon. Are we even sure
that Iran was responsible? Has that been definitively?
Increasingly. Well, Secretary Pompeo yesterday, after coming back from talking with the Saudis, said that there was no doubt this was Iran, and I'm going on the basis of what Pompeo said. Right. He certainly has the basis for much better information, and that's, I think, very important to talk about this whole ramping up of the violence with Iran. With Iran ramping up the violence and trying to cause chaos in the Middle East, and where's it going to go? The other, I think, big news this week is the economy and the 25 basis point adjustment down, the reduction in the Fed rates that were done by the Federal Reserve. I don't think it was as much as Trump wanted. He wanted more like 50 basis points or the rates brought to zero. But I was predicting we would get 25 basis points. That's a 1/4%, which in interest rate terms is the typical kind of cut or increase that the Fed makes incrementally. And then I think the last topic I want to cover is the where the Democrats are, because the Democrats now are, I think Biden is slipping in the polls and Elizabeth Warren is rising in the polls, and there's been this hyping of her crowd size. She had a big rally in Washington Square Park in New York past few days, and that did draw a large crowd. I'm not sure she's going to draw equally large crowds everywhere she goes. But the point is they're hyping her crowds, and she's trying to get, beyond her socialist and Pocahontas past in order to rehabilitate herself as the front runner. And she stands a chance of becoming the front runner among the Democrats, although Biden continues to be, for those Democrats who are not hard left, who are not all have gone over the cliff with socialism, they're afraid, I think legitimately afraid, of Elizabeth Warren or any of the others being the candidate. Biden, I'm not sure, has the mental capacity.
I agree.
And that's, I think,
his teeth are falling out. He's bleeding out the eyes. It's not looking so good for Mr. Biden. I'm sorry to cut you short, Doctor, but we have to get over to Patreon very soon to start the stream on time, so people can join us at patreon.com/Jerome Corsi, patreon.com crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. In addition to those topics, Doctor, I'm going to try to ask you what your thoughts are about Julian Assange being stuck in jail for the past several months, a fate surely they would have liked for you to suffer as well. So we'll have a lot to talk about when people join us in just 10 minutes, and I will see you there, Dr. Corsi. I know everybody is looking forward to hearing what you have to say about all these topics.
Well, I'm looking forward to it as well, and we are going on. I will be reviving also CorsiNation.com. We're going to be getting that with more current material on a regular basis, and I'm going to start doing some podcasts on news broadcasts, maybe even on a 2 or 3 a week, maybe building to a daily schedule.
Wonderful.
And I think that covering the news and doing podcasts to cover the news will be a feature that we're going to use. I have been really not active. I'm just beginning to kind of get active again after Mueller. We took us some time, my wife and myself, the family, to recover, but we are we're now essentially ready to resume writing and resuming some interviews, and we're going to begin. Your program, I think, was one of the first to get us back into it, and you'll see some major changes in CorsiNation.com in the next few weeks.
Wonderful. So people can log on there, and we'll see everybody on patreon.com/Jerome Corsi and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth at 5 p.m. Don't miss the show. We'll see you there.
Thank you.